Big question that's come up this week is whether finishing the top of your provincial championship in the hurling should allow you to have home venue for the final. I think it's pretty obvious you do need an incentive. Tipperary winning all 4 games and now they have to go away to the All-Ireland and League champions in Limerick. It just doesn't make sense. Especially when they're after getting a couple of injuries out of it too, and Limerick didn't necessarily seem to be playing their full team. Obviously Keane Lynch, the hurler of the year, wasn't started. Grode Hegarty, Graham Mulcahy an all-star, Declan Hannon wasn't tagged out either. So you think that you would deserve home venue, and I think that that's something that should be brought in future, because you need to have an incentive to make every game some way important. The idea for Tipperary now picking up a couple of injuries by trying to win that game the other day in a way that it didn't feel that Limerick were, that they're getting doubly punished away from home, getting the injuries. And most of the teams in Munster, well, the three of the main teams, Cork, Tipperary and Limerick, they all have capacities big enough to host home Munster final games. Clare and Waterford probably don't, but I still think that they should have the option to host a Munster final if they get there, and the GAA can offer them an incentive if they decide to move to a bigger venue where more money will be made, that you'll get a better cut of it. That's something that I'm sure happens anyway. And even if you wanted a neutral ground, you could use Fitzgerald Stadium. Imagine for Clare, if they had a situation whereby they had a home Munster final, that they would drag a team like, for example, Waterford, just a huge trek all the way over to Waterford, and that's something that they could work to their advantage. But finish top, that should give you the option of a home provincial final, or the decision yourself if you want to bring it somewhere else. In Leinster it's probably slightly different, because pretty much all of the Leinster finals are in Croke Park, with the exception last year that the replay went to Thurles. There was 25,000 at that replay. Since 2012, the average attendance is 31,000 at a Leinster hurling final. The exception was 2017 when 60,000 showed up. It was Wexford's first Leinster final, and I think it was 10 years, so that bolstered that. The only in general, then the average would probably be close to the high 20s, which Nolan Park could facilitate. Again, same as if Clare had had the option of a home Munster final. If, for example, Wexford and their attendance is probably around 14,000 down at Wexford Park, you still have the option to play it at home, or if you're offered a higher cut of the gate, play it at Croke Park. I just think it's good to have that option and incentive to have those home Munster finals or home provincial finals when you do finish top of the table. For Tipperary, you have to ask if the juice was worth the squeeze in beating Limerick the other day, putting out your strongest team. I know Liam Sheedy wants to get his team used to winning matches. Throughout the league didn't happen. They've been losing a lot of close matches in recent times. So to win 4 from 4 it obviously is very good for the overall panel confidence, but the collateral damage of losing Cathal Barrett for the Munster final, which seems almost certain, and losing Bonner Maher for the year is absolutely huge, especially when we see that John Kiley, by resting those big name players Hannon, Lynch, Mulcahy and Hegarty, he clearly wasn't taking the game as seriously as if it was do or die. He obviously expected results to go his way, and yes, there's a chance they could have missed out on the Munster final, but it seemed to him that the bigger picture is the All-Ireland. And I know he's talked about the Munster before, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and the fact that he didn't put out his strongest team and go bald-headed for this one, just that tells you the story. I asked John Kiley afterwards how different this Tipperary team are now, the one that's just won 4 from 4 and playing heads up hurling, getting stuck in, tackle rate good, protecting the back line, compared with the team 12 months ago that basically left the back door open, huge amount of space in front of the full back line in fact, that other teams were exploiting, such as Limerick. And also, not to mention that Tipperary were playing what seemed like basically a long ball game with no real appreciation of how to work the ball up the field last year, which of course was quite different to 2016, so it's hard to know exactly what happened during Michael Ryan's era, that they played the ball in a considered fashion for a fair bit of 2016 compared to what happened last year. Who replaces Bonner Maher in the forward line for Tipperary? There is no other Bonner Maher in the Tipperary team. Someone else who can take the ball, get in behind a half back line and burst through, or collect the ball on the inside line, turn and go at his man. Probably a lot of the Tipperary forwards get the ball, they have a look up, bit of stick work, wristiness, throw the ball over the bar. They don't necessarily all take their man on in the way that he can. Ken Hogan refers to him as the bionic man, but unfortunately we won't be seeing him again this year. And it's happened before under Liam Sheedy that he's lost key players and he's had to find answers. Look at 2010, he didn't have James Woodlock, and he didn't have, so he put Brendan Maher midfield. He didn't have Pat Kerwick, who got injured and probably never recovered from his injuries. And he found Grode Ryan and Bonner Maher for that half forward line. So the options that he has are Dan McCormack, Niall O'Mara, assuming he comes back okay from injury. Ger Brown is a young player, probably underexposed at this level. Mark Keogh, Jake Morrison, Cian Darcy the same as well. So filling that void of Bonner Maher, I don't think it can be underestimated, his loss at this point, because he's such a seasoned player and he was just on such good form. Clare against Cork, Clare finally getting a win, and there's been so many sticks to beat Clare with lately. It's almost a relief not to have to hammer them again. But for Cork, why not man mark Tony Kelly? Why not find a player that has no interest in the ball, only in actually stopping the man? Because if you have a player who goes out against Tony Kelly in the back line and wants to do a bit of hurling, unfortunately he's just going to get annihilated. And Tony Kelly puts up a big score. You saw what Brendan Maher did against Tony Kelly the previous day. No interest in really playing his own game, even though he would be a natural hurler, and just goes out to stop Kelly, and that's all you want. You basically want to reduce it to 14 aside and just have Tony Kelly out of the equation, even if that means your own man isn't going to do any hurling. Who's a more hated man in Galway this week, Matty Kenny or Anthony Cunningham? Because both have plotted the downfall of their native county. Matty Kenny knocking Galway out of the hurling championship, and Anthony Cunningham beating Galway with Roscommon in the football final. Interesting, the both went for the hurling job with Dublin this past season. Obviously Matty got it, and Anthony Cunningham, I saw him at plenty of club championship games heading into the autumn. I wonder would both be considered pretty soon for their county jobs. Anthony Cunningham with football, he has an unbelievable CV at this stage, what he's done at both club level and now with Roscommon as well. And then of course Matty, he's obviously doing pretty well with Dublin, knocking out his home county, and he's done well at the club scene as well. You wonder what sort of pressure Micheál Donoghue's going to be in for over the close season. So maybe it'll be another year down the line for both of them. Alan Nolan scored a point from play despite being a goalkeeper for Dublin against Galway. I've seen him do it before at club level for St. Bridget's. We were playing him probably 3 years ago in a league game, and got the ball on his own, probably 21, sold it out to 45 and threw it over. So as soon as he got the ball the other day inside his own 45, I said to the person beside me, this is going over, and over it went. So fantastic score. That Galway team, geez, it was really unimpressive as the game went on, because Dublin were hanging on with those goals. They brought a few forwards on. Conor Whelan going off was massive because they were without a leader for a while. A couple of players did okay. Colin Mannion got a few scores, but Joe Canning came on and got a few scores. Davy Glennon came on, tried hard, but what disappointed me was seeing him dive on a couple of occasions, just looking for those handy frees. And I think everyone remembers the All-Ireland in 2012 against Kilkenny when he went down quite easily. Hard to say if it was a dive or not. Went down quite easily and won a free for Joe Canning to equalise and sent to a replay. Tried a couple of dives on this occasion. Referee didn't fall for it, so very happy to see that. And I'd hope that would be the end of the diving from him anyway, because it just doesn't look nice. With Galway gone now, you have to wonder, would Kevin Walsh, the football manager of Galway, think of calling a few of those players in? The obvious one, of course, is Dahi Burke, who played and won an All-Ireland club title with Corofin this past season. If I remember correctly, the last time the Galway hurlers got knocked out early was 2014 by Tipperary in the qualifiers, and Dahi Burke was then part of the football panel after that. Jason Flynn is one that's supposed to be quite a good footballer, Cahill and Pádraig Mannion. And then Johnny Glynn played football for New York last year, so you'd have to wonder, would he be thinking along the lines of some twin towers, Johnny Glynn and Damien Comer in the full forward line. So let me know what you think of that, whether that is something that Kevin Walsh should do, because they were poor in the kind of final against Roscommon, and they probably need some sort of injection. I wonder, does the Roscommon game and the scenes afterwards, is that a reason why the provinces should remain? Because people worry about the local rivalries being dented, and scenes like you had the other day with like thousands of people coming on the pitch and the players being hoisted and the flags and all that. But I just think it rings a little bit hollow to think all of a sudden those scenes wouldn't come if you got rid of those local rivalries. Like, look at the Leinster Hurling Championship, which is basically a makey-uppy tournament just to make the just because there's a couple of odds and ends. Previously Antrim and Galway, they didn't really have a home province, so this is the best way to make it work. And both provinces in hurling are now 5-a-side, so teams that would have been there before, Laois, Offaly, Westmeath, they're booted out. So it's a bit of a makey-uppy tournament in that sense, which is really working. But the scenes from Roscommon, Galway weren't all that different from the scenes of Dublin against Galway in the Leinster Hurling Championship, where Galway have just been imported. So I just think if you have a good system, if you have good competition where teams of similar standing are playing against each other, and and there's something on the line, you're going to get those sort of scenes anyway. So I think the best thing to do is just get competition structures that work, and not necessarily just fixate so much on the provincials. Dahi Regan did some tweets last week before the Offaly relegation against Kerry. Now, obviously, things are shambles in Offaly and have been for a long time, and there was big discussions about players just being brought onto the panel ever since Joachim Kelly took over. A couple of players for their debuts. Started the game well enough, red card as always, as we talked about here before, and things fell apart. But I think Dahi Regan, you can't be tweeting that sort of stuff, because your county, it's a last chance saloon. I think it's a very selfish thing to do. You should have waited till after the game, but that was your choice and probably didn't affect the result, but not the right thing to do. Conor Cox's performance in the kind of final made me think, what's the greatest inter-county transfer in history? Conor Cox, obviously very good. Larry Tompkins is the one that stands out more than most because he was a huge part in Cork winning an All-Ireland football final. Shea Fahy, of course, is also transferred from Kildare down to Cork, so he's in that conversation as well. I think Larry Tompkins is the one that stands out as well. Another one that has been very successful, or was massively successful, had to be Declan Darcy. Now, he hadn't played for Dublin before he joined Leitrim, but he was Dublin born. He has some trials with Dublin underage, and he ends up going with Leitrim, and is a huge part of that Connacht title success in 1994, and you can't underestimate that achievement. So he has to be up there in that conversation. Other ones that spring to mind, Carl O'Dwyer going from Kerry to Kildare with his dad Micko back in the 90s. That was a big one. And another one, when I was chatting to a few people about this, Matt Root, this is more an interesting one than necessarily competing with the likes of Tompkins and Declan Darcy, is Matt Root, who played for Kilkenny, then was with Limerick, and he played with them in 1973, but he also ended up playing a football game for Kilkenny in the league, which got him suspended, and by the time Limerick were in the All-Ireland final later that year, he hadn't had a chance to work himself back into the team. They're up against his native Kilkenny. They win that game, the All-Ireland, the one, they didn't win it for 45 years after it, but he's in the Limerick team again the next year. They get to the All-Ireland final, playing against Kilkenny again, lose the All-Ireland. He then ends up moving to Dublin and switching back to playing with Kilkenny, and he wins All-Ireland finals in 1975 and 1979 as well. So had a big impact with two counties anyway, even if it's probably not up at the Tompkins, Declan Darcy level. And in recent times as well for the Dublin hurlers, you'd have to say in terms of winning the league title in 2011, which was a watershed moment for Dublin hurling, and the Leinster title in 2013, Ryan O'Dwyer, Maurice O'Brien and Niall Corcoran as well, in any order you like, would be important ones also.